Hello, this is Yarrow. Welcome to an episode of the Yarrow podcast. So, I had a question come through to me about how to spend cash flow on business growth, especially during those phases where you don't have a lot of money to invest, you do have some, and you're making that decision. Should this be spent on marketing? Should this be spent maybe on some kind of coaching? Should it be hiring another team member? Should I just take it as profit? Because, we all like to do that. I face this decision all the time, but there's been a few key moments in my various businesses in the past and the present that I'd like to share as again, not really a warning, but I definitely feel like I made mistakes and I want to point them out. And I also made the right decision sometimes for the moment, but it wouldn't necessarily be the right decision all the time. So if you're in that situation where you have some excess cash flow, and I know the temptation just to, take it yourself is always there, but you do want to grow, and that's perhaps the first big decision always to consider. Are you in a aggressive growth phase, or are you in a taking some profit off the table phase? I like to be able to do both ideally, but frankly, that's not always possible. So let me start with one of the very earliest times I faced this decision, which honestly was the hardest point because I had so little money. I had no personal wealth at that time, very little savings, maybe $5,000 in the bank, and that was it. But my business was starting to work enough that there was a few $1,000s in cash coming in. I wouldn't call it like excess cash, but it was a margin being made on the services of my very first agency. And I faced this decision of, okay, I can take this money, and boy, did I want to take it myself then, for sure. And frankly, that's more often than not the decision I had been making up to that point, for obvious reasons, just being broke and need to pay for rent and food. But I wanted to also grow my business, and I had the opportunity to invest in marketing, invest in potentially growing my team. And at that point, I was doing most of the marketing myself. Most of it was offline. A little bit was starting to become more online with going after Google rankings. So I had this decision, what do I do with this extra money? Now, I ended up making two choices that I didn't do straight away. I'll be honest, I kept that money, I think, for many, many months. But I started to feel frustration in the situation I was in because I was doing everything myself. So I then made the call to invest in two things. I hired an agency to do a complete revamp of my business website, especially the copy. Now, this was a one-time fee. It was a hefty fee at the time for me. I think it was about $3,000. So it was literally like 2 months of profit or excess cash flow. So I did that, but that was an easier choice because it was a one-time thing. I didn't feel like it was going to be ongoing. The next thing I did, though, was to hire my first ever executive assistant to manage my email, which freed me up. And that enabled me to do many other things. In fact, start an entire other business around blogging, which became my education company. And that was a more difficult decision because it was an ongoing payment. I would have to keep paying this person if I wanted to keep doing the work. And I did it. And, within a couple of months, I was like, why did I not do this sooner? I really regretted waiting because it freed me up from every single customer service email, every single admin process I had to do to keep the business going. So that was huge. Fast forward to my education company. So, many years later, and I've got way more cash coming in, and I've got a completely different attitude around investing in growth and especially team building. I'm very much ready to grow my team, and I'm planning to do my first ever product launch. So in this case, I spent money that was like a lot. I hired a affiliate manager. I hired a couple of tech people. I had my executive assistants already there, and I put way more money in than I would have expected to even get back from the launch if it failed. Like, I didn't know whether this launch was going to work. It was the first time I ever had done a launch, and I could have made nothing from it. And I was putting in, I don't know, I think it was like $25,000 into this launch, which was a lot of money for me at the time. I was definitely in a better financial situation and making more money from my education money business than I did from my agency. But that was a huge decision. But it went well, and it actually really helped with my launch, and obviously led to that business growing. So I have no regrets on that one. And then I made a decision shortly after that, actually, to do the first thing I ever did in regards to coaching, and that's hire or join a coaching program myself. I hadn't done that yet. And this is probably one of the decisions I actually struggled with the most because it was $5,000 for a program. And it was, typical coaching. You get coaching from the coach. There was some course materials. There was some group interaction. But for me, it was just really two things: getting to speak to this coach and seeing how they delivered what they did. I was actually curious because I was getting more into coaching myself. I wanted to see, what they offered, how they structured it, and everything that was deliverable. Now, what was interesting about this experience with coaching, it was very validating and very powerful for my confidence to do it. I won't say there was like an immediate direct return on investment, but getting to speak to the coach, getting to see how they did what they did, showed me that I could do what they were doing. And I saw, what they built. And I was like, I could build something like this. And they explained, their marketing techniques, their launch techniques. And I was like, okay, I realize I'm missing a few components of this. And all the things they're doing, yes, there's work to do, no doubt. But I could do it. And to me, that was the biggest thing. It gave me like a path forward, a strategy, and the confidence to see that I could execute on that strategy. And I don't think I would have had that if I didn't hire the coach. I might have got there eventually, but this really solidified the potential. I think it demystified things for me too. Often with people who are further along than you, like coaches that you hire, or have they done something you want to do, you think there might be some, mystical secret or some advantage they have. And then you start working with them and yes, you go, okay, yes, I can see, there's these things that they do that I don't do that I need to do, but it's not rocket science. And they just help you put together the flow, the sequence of things to do to make something work. And they give you some good strategies, some good tactics, but it's the commitment to the coach that makes a difference. So that was the first time I ever experienced that. And honestly, that was probably the most hesitant I was to invest cash. That was $5,000 I could have put straight in my pocket, but I gave it to the coach. And then I went on to grow that education business to a seven-figure business. And that was huge. I never had made that much money from a company before. Um, Going to more recent years, I've had a different situation when it comes to investing capital to grow a business, or how to use our capital. Uh, my current business, I have a co-founder, so every decision we make about spending money is a joint decision, and that's interesting because prior to that, I could spend money on whatever direction I wanted to. And this is both good and bad. Obviously, it's good because there's no one else to convince or, make this call with. But it's also bad because you can be a little bit trigger happy and start saying yes to a whole bunch of things that you probably shouldn't have. I think that's probably the biggest thing I've noticed as a difference when I work with my co-founder currently. Especially, I think in the early years, I'm less so this now, but I think our first 4 or 5 years, there were many times where I would have, chosen to run a certain marketing campaign or maybe hired an agency or a contractor or anything, all kinds of things that come across my internet desk. And we should do that. We should do that. We should do that. And I very likely would have spent money that resulted in nothing. But because of having co-founder, we're a little bit more thoughtful about what decisions we make. It's definitely a bit slower. But what's also interesting about it too is just your own attitudes around how much money you want to pay yourself versus how much you want to put into growth. And I think if anything, that's the area where I felt the impact, perhaps a little bit different to what I would personally do individually. I think I would probably be spending a bit more money on growth than I have with my co-founder. But like I said, pros and cons. It's been great for my own cash flow situation in certainly the last few years with the business. But I do think we could potentially have moved faster. I don't know if we'd be in a different situation, but we probably would have run some experiments and got the same outcomes a little quicker. Maybe we'd be further along because of that. That's one of those big what ifs. You don't really know. What is also interesting though is early on in this business, when we didn't have a lot of cash flow yet, because of the way it was structured, and my co-founder was doing kind of the delivering the service part of the business, where I was doing more of the let's go find clients part of the business. And because she was servicing clients, we kind of treated her like one of our contractors when it came to getting paid. So she made money from the day she started servicing our contractors. But I wasn't servicing contractors. I was just try again, servicing our clients. So I wasn't servicing clients. So I wasn't like directly producing revenue. I was getting the clients, but not doing the labor to meet their needs. And because of that, I was like, well, I want to invest all of our excess cash flow into growth because I need to run experiments. So I took no money from the business during the first few years, and like every excess $1,000, and maybe it was $2,000, it was like, okay, let's spend this money on something new in marketing, and that was just because like without that money, you're doing everything based on your own labor, and that can be very slow to get some kind of outcome. I mean, I feel it now because I run a lot of my current campaigns for my new business, Patrick AI, just off my own energy. I haven't spent a single dime yet on anything other than engineering. That will change, but it is like you're restricted by your cash flow situation. So that's why I think these decisions are so important. Should you hire team members to help you grow? Should you run a new marketing campaign with cash flow? Should you hire some sort of coaching? Ideally, you want all these things. You want enough cash to have a coach. You want enough cash to run constant marketing campaigns. You want to be able to grow your team. But there's all these phases during the early years, especially where you're making either or decisions, not yes and decisions. And that's difficult to like know. This is perhaps where a coach does come in handy because you can say, should I be, putting this into marketing or hiring this team member? As a coach myself, I always rely on the theory of constraints. So if you've never studied that, go study the theory of constraints. It's really helpful for determining what should be the immediate constraint to work on. And that might be hiring a team member, or that might be running a marketing campaign. And it might be hiring a team member to do a marketing campaign. But usually there's a very obvious next step constraint is the thing that will at least make you, take a step forward. But that's a topic for another day. I'll wrap it up here. If you're at the situation where you're not sure how to spend your cash flow, I hope that gave you a little bit of food for thought. It's not a black and white answer ever. It's always situational. It's always based on how much cash flow and what your business is doing at that time. And you constantly make that decision, every single month. It's like, how do we keep money? How do we spend money? I will say, there's seasons for this. There's that growth season where you do want to spend more money, but at some point, if you're not getting a return, your motivation is going to die. I know that was the case for my current business. There were many times where I'm like, we got to start paying me something because I can't keep running these marketing experiments and, not get anything in return. And my income incrementally increased as our business grew, and that's turned into a very healthy salary for me. But if that didn't happen, obviously I don't think I would be still working on that business. So you've got to balance your own motivation with this too. And sometimes there's a hard decision to make as well. Maybe the numbers just don't work out and you might have to make some drastic decisions. Okay, that's it for me. If you're looking to have discussions like this specifically about your situation, I would love to help you as a coach. If that is the thing you think you need now, you can head to insidegrowth.com and book a call with me to see if we're a good fit. I'd love to learn more about your business. That's insidegrowth.com. That's it for today. My name is Yarrow. This has been an episode of the Yarrow Podcast. I will talk to you again soon.